One of the biggest news stories that's happened this century in the state of Alabama is the HealthSouth story, the Richard Scrushy story that erupted in 2006. There's two charges. You had the bribery charge of paying to be on the certificate of need board, and then there was the fraud charges that were leveled against him as well. And it shook the state of Alabama to its core, because this is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, company in the state of Alabama. Well, we're bringing on Richard Scrushy, who says he now has evidence to show that he was wrongfully imprisoned, and we're going to hear his side of the story. We have an incredible culture here in the state of Alabama, but our politics and public policy don't reflect the people of Alabama. Media drives culture. Culture is what drives politics and public policy. Welcome, everyone, to 1819 News, the podcast. I'm Bryan Dawson, CEO of 1819 News, and host of this here podcast, where we are in pursuit of a free and flourishing Alabama every single week. This week, we've got a pretty exciting episode. I think there's going to be a lot of people that watch this one. It's going a little bit deeper with some kind of new revelations about a story that many of you are probably familiar with. I'm bringing on Richard Scrushy, who is the founder and former CEO of HealthSouth. Richard is also the father of 9 children and 9 grandchildren. And if you've lived in Alabama for any amount of time, any length of time at all, you're probably familiar with the controversy that erupted in 2006 that ended with Richard being convicted on 6 counts that surrounded bribery charges over a supposed payment for a seat on the Certificate of Need Board paid to then Governor Don Siegelman. So Richard was acquitted of fraud charges that were also leveled against him around the same time. Richard then served 5 years in prison and was released in April of 2012. So today, the day that we're recording this, Richard did a press conference in Montgomery at the federal courthouse announcing that they have uncovered concealed exculpatory evidence which reveals corruption within the Department of Justice and wrongful imprisonment. And so I wanted to bring Richard on to give him the opportunity to tell his side of what's going on. There was a time, Richard and I were talking about this off camera. There was a time, even as someone who's been involved in the prison system myself, I just believed that our institutions always did things the right way, and that there was never any corruption. And all the press releases that they put out saying so and so indicted, it's obviously because they're going to be guilty, and that's just the way that it is. Our system would never wrongfully imprison someone. They would never do that. And that's the way that most people operate. We want to blindly trust our institutions. Then obviously, on one level, everything that's happened since COVID, a lot of people's eyes have opened up to the fact of how corrupt our institutions actually are. And then personally, since starting 1819 News 3.5 years ago, I've come into contact with some people who that are in prison right now, I believe wrongfully. And I spent 2 years investigating a case that was in the Northern District of Alabama that we still haven't reported on yet. We're still actually working on putting that together. That was absolutely heinous what was done to these guys. And so I do not believe just because this is what the ruling was and everything else, that's for sure what happened. And I wanted to give Richard the opportunity to come and share with us this exculpatory evidence and also talk to him just a little bit about what he's been up to. So Richard, thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Yes, listen, thank you for having me. I'm very excited about what you've been doing and became very familiar with your success on 1819, and it's just a real honor to be here with you today, and I appreciate the time.
Absolutely. So before we dive into all the exculpatory evidence and everything, so you got out of prison in 2012. I got out in August 2012. I'm just throwing that out there. Okay. So you've been out about the same amount of time. What have you been up to? What's been keeping you busy? What do you got going on?
Well, okay, let me just tell you, before I went in, I spent 2 years training in the ministerial area, and became an ordained minister. And I had a church called Grace and Purpose. My wife and I, both pastors, and we ran that church for a pretty good while. And, we had a television show on Channel 6, Fox, that went out and then also went to various other stations and was syndicated out around the state and kind of bled into Florida and Georgia and Mississippi. But And we did almost 1,000 television shows. And so it was a Christian television show. It was a wake-up show. It was in the morning. So we did that, and that was, again, we had a lot of different people from all different areas, you know, and we had a lot of pastors on, a lot of evangelists and whatnot, prophets, apostles, and did a lot of great work. But anyways, once they came after me and wrongly imprisoned me, immediately when I went in, I was a pastor. So they put me, you know, I started preaching in the church. And so the whole time I was there, I was a pastor in the church. And it was funny because I got there and there was an 82-year-old Baptist preacher that had been locked up for something ridiculous. And when I went to the church, you know, it was an inmate church, inmate-led church, which thank goodness we had that there. And he said to me, he said, you know, and I told him I had a church and what had happened to me. And he said, you know, he says, I'm going home next month. He said, God sent you here to take my place.
Interesting.
And so they said, you're going to preach next Sunday, and when you preach, if you can do what you claim you do, you'll be able to take over this church. Well, I went in there and I preached a sermon, and he came up afterwards. He said, you're good. You're good. You got it. I'm not worried. He said, God sent you here. And I ended up preaching there. But because I'm a musician and play the piano and the guitar, and we didn't have any music in there, so we had to write our own music. So I wrote over 100 Christian songs. And I formed they didn't have a praise and worship band. They had one guy playing the guitar, and he could not sing, and he could not play. And it was, I said, what was that song that you just sang? He said, you didn't recognize that song? No. And it was like an old Christian song that everybody knows, like Amazing Grace. You couldn't tell it was Amazing Grace. You know, I was like, what is that? It was so bad. So anyways, I went through the prison there. We had 600 inmates in there, and I was able to put together a bass player, a drummer, you know, a piano player. I played the guitar. I took the lead on the singing. I put 4 guys together, and I had 4 singers, and we became a quartet, and we could sing anything. Those guys were fantastic. You know, a lot of talented people end up in prison. Just about
to say that. It's crazy how much talent is in there.
So we did all the singing. We did all the praise and worship. I was doing, you know, very active in doing the sermons, and there were a few other people too that would preach as well. But and we were good enough that anything that went on there on the prison campus that the leadership in the prison had, like, you know, they did have events. They always brought us in to sing and play. Yeah. And I ended up speaking at events for the warden. I asked them, well, why are you asking me to speak? They said, well, we can trust you. We know that you're not going to say anything that's going to hurt us. You're not going to say anything stupid. And they would have people in from the community. So I spent my time there doing that. So anyways, long story short, when I left there, and my 5 years were up, and I was so active in the church there, I had to go somewhere where I could continue the ministry because I was just so, the only way I could get through 5 years of being locked up in a prison was to be, you know, it was a God thing. I mean, I had my prayers, there was a track there, and I'd walk 7 miles every day, praying 7. Everything was 7, 7, 7. So I formed a company called Seventh Power. Came out, and I immediately went to a church there in Houston, Texas on 290. It was called Christ Over Our Life. That stands for COOL. So it was COOL Ministry. And I went there, and I became associate pastor there. So I was preaching there, and when I came in, they had a horrible situation. They were playing CDs, and everybody was singing to a CD, and I said, look, guys, I can perform, I can sing, I can play. And you are not going to believe this, but those guys that came out of prison that I played with in prison came over there, and we formed our band. And and you know the name of the band was called Free Indeed. Free Indeed. Because we were free indeed, man. Let me tell you. And so we called it Free Indeed, and so we were the praise and worship team, and I preached at that church and was associate pastor there for over 2 years. And I had to drive over an hour to get there every Sunday. And my family and I, we lived in about 30 miles north of Houston. And so I had to drive this long way, and my family didn't want to drive that. And they said, look, and they were going to another church, and my wife was actually director of that ministry, a very, very successful ministry called The Woodlands. They had about 18,000 members, and she was running. Carrie Shook was the pastor there, and she was the director of that ministry. And so she said, look, you got to go to church with me. You got to stop doing this down there. Bryan, I know you're a spiritual guy. I had 3 prophets call me within a month and said, your time is up at Cool Ministry. It's time for you to move on. And after the 3rd one called me, I said, I'm moving on. I came home after one Sunday, and I told my wife, I said, okay, I'm going to church with you and my kids. because I was spending all my time. I had to go there Sunday night. They had Saturday night service too for inmates that were coming out of prison. So I was working with those inmates. So I was there Wednesday night, Saturday night, Sunday night, and I was and I'd been in prison 5 years. I needed to be with my family.
Yeah.
And so it was a time thing. A season was over with. So I went and started, spending that time with my family. And it was a great thing because I had little children. But anyways, so I've done a lot in the ministry. I continue to preach and travel and speak at churches, and I still do that today. Weddings, I've done those. I've done whatever I can do, if anything, and I've gone into the prisons, and I've done a lot of work into the prisons. It's been about 600 hours of prison ministry. Wow. So I've been doing that. And then I have an office that I work out of behind my house. And people call me all the time. I review business plans. I consult with people. I help young entrepreneurs. I've written 2 books. I gave you one today called It Shouldn't Happen in America. I wrote a book on when building $1 billion company. Here's a few things you might want to think about.
Yeah.
I continue to, play some music, not as much as I used to, but spend time with my kids. I had a son that was a great baseball player, played high school baseball, and never missed a ball. And once I was out of prison, I spent time with him, spent time with my daughters. My wife's been very active in lots of different things. She was chairman of the Texas Distinguished Young Women program out in Texas. I had a daughter that won that. And, so I've been active with my kids and just helping other people and doing whatever ministry I could do. And that's where I've spent my time.
There you go. That's a good time spent. So here we are today. I don't even know what day it is. This happens to me all the time. Thursday, March 6th. Is that right?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Let's go with that.
That's when we're recording. And today you had a press conference at the federal courthouse in Montgomery, in the Middle District, where your convictions took place. Mm-hmm. And in that press release, you revealed that you guys have now exculpatory evidence, or showed where there was exculpatory evidence that was restricted from being presented. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that was enough to show that you believe there's corruption in the Department of Justice, and that you were wrongfully imprisoned because of that. And so one thing I want to say real quick, a lot of times, what a lot of people are going to say is like, well, Richard, why aren't you showing more remorse? You've got now, it's like, well, if you're saying that you're wrongfully imprisoned, why would you? Does that make sense? So it's like it's one or the other. Yeah. It's like, okay, if you're saying I'm guilty, well, then you'd want to see remorse. But if you believe you were wrongfully imprisoned, I would like to hear about that and what you guys have.
Yeah, that's really important. On a pardon application, it asks you, they want you to explain, what have you done? You did all these things wrong. Now, what have you done about it? And how do what are you going to do to make it right? I didn't do anything wrong. So on a pardon application, I have to explain that. I was not guilty. I was wrongly prosecuted. It was political prosecution. It was weaponization. I was targeted. I mean, you have to put all that in. You have to explain it. I didn't do anything wrong. Yeah. And today was a great day. Today was a day that, I believe the light has been shown on the corruption within the Department of Justice in the Middle District of Alabama, Montgomery. What's happened is that, when you're in a trial, the prosecutors are the officers of the court, and you want to believe them, and they're supposed to tell the truth, and anything that comes out of their mouth should be truthful, right?
Yeah,
as officers of the court, supposed to be. And so when they say the judge asked them to turn over all the exculpatory information, my attorneys were complaining they didn't believe that they had turned it all over, and the judge gave them an explicit order. And matter of fact, in my press release, I put that out there. And today in my press conference, I read the judge's order. He told him, he said, I want you to turn over everything, every single, note, 302 from FBI agents, anything, any correspondence, anything. He said from any agency, both state, local, federal, anything. And he said, and that was on a Friday afternoon. He said, I want it turned over by Monday morning. Well, Monday morning we came in, and the judge said, before we bring the jury in, did you turn the exculpatory information over, all the Brady information, and just for your readers, what that means is anything that would help me, help the defendant. Any testimony, anybody you interviewed that said, I don't know anything, I think Richard didn't do that, or anything you can come up with. And a lot of Brady information is created during a trial when somebody testifies wrongly and you hear different things. I mean, you want to have the notes where they met with these people. You want the grand jury testimony. You want to tie all that together because If you have that information, you can then know I need to subpoena that person. I need to be able to put them on the stand. We want to, you know how to examine them, and then you know how to cross-examine people. But you also know where there's corroboration and where there isn't. And you got to have that information to try a case. Well, we didn't have that, and so when Monday morning, when the prosecutors came back in and the judge said, "Did you bring it?" They said, "We don't have any." Well, we knew that. Well, you know, they gave us 5 302s, which are 302s is what the FBI, when they write up a report, they call it a 302, right? So we had 5 of those. The only witness, there was only one witness in the case, Nick Bailey. Nick Bailey was a chief of staff for Don Siegelman. He was the only witness, and Nick Bailey gave us a statement. I have a statement, signed statement from Nick Bailey that he met with the prosecutors over 70 times. As a matter of fact, we're going to put that on my website so people can see that. He said specifically 24 of those meetings he talked about Richard Scrushy and Don Siegelman. That's Brady information. We should have had every bit of that, because what happened is his testimony was morphed over 24 meetings, and that's Brady. Well, we got 5. I have a statement that there were 24. There's 19 of those missing. That's criminal. Federal prosecutors have to turn that information over. They have to turn it over to you prior to the trial. They didn't. So anyways, bottom line, they told the judge they didn't have any. Now, sitting in that room were all the FBI agents and all of the investigators that knew that was a lie, because they were in the meeting. So when Nick Bailey gave us a statement, he actually said and named all of the FBI agents and the investigators that were in the rooms, and he said they took notes while he was talking. So they have the notes, and those notes were taken, and they have to turn those over. But it's worse than that.
If you're running a ministry or you own a business, my guess is that you've been thinking about starting a podcast for a while now, but for various reasons it hasn't happened yet. Send me an email. I need to personally connect you with Yonder Child Media. They built this studio in 2 days and tackle all of the production. I just come in, start talking, and leave. It's that easy. They do everything else. Whether you want to record at your business or a home office like they just built for me, you come in, start talking, and Yonder Child will do everything else. Send me an email. That's going to be Bryan, Bryan.Dawson, Dawson, at 1819news.com, and I'd be happy to personally connect you.
I don't remember exactly when it happened. It's over a year, not too long ago. An attorney called me, and he said, "Richard, you've got to come see me." And I said, "Come see you for what?" He said, "I've got information that you need. It has to do with your trial." And I said, "Well, what is it?" He said, "Come see me." So I did. I drove from Texas. He said, "It's very important." Came to see him. An individual had come into his office who he knew and went, and just in conversation said, I went to before the grand jury on the Scrushy trial, and I met with those prosecutors numerous times, and this attorney said, "Really? What? Tell me about it." And he told him, he said, "Well, Richard he was innocent, and this was wrong." And he said, "I told those prosecutors that. I was there. I know. I have information. I'm telling you that Richard did not do the things that they claimed." And I told them they were going down the wrong road. It was wrong. So he spilled all those beans to this attorney. The attorney called me and said, "I got to talk to you." So I went and met with him. We have an affidavit from that gentleman right now. He had numerous meetings with the prosecutor. He was involved in the grand jury. They didn't turn any of that information over. So then we said, well, wait a minute, this may be the tip of the iceberg. So we began to dig. We knew that. We found out about Nick Bailey, found out about this gentleman, and then we kept digging. We have others now. And it's not over with. Bryan, we're still finding them out. There are people out there right now today that the FBI agents went out to, and the prosecutors, an interview that was exculpatory information, and they never told us about it. We're still getting. We're going to get additional affidavits. It's going to happen because we're after the people right now. One gentleman that we really want has moved out of the state, and we're trying to locate him. He was a major contributor to the exculpatory information, and we're going to get him too. But we have enough right now, and in this file right here today, I have sworn affidavits that will overturn this case. Okay, now if we'd have had that information, we would have been able to subpoena those people. We would have had them they would have been telling the jury, Richard's innocent. He didn't do this. None of this happened. And they would have given them the evidence and the proof to be able to show that. So the outcome of the trial would have been totally different. They put up one witness. We didn't know about all these people. We now know about them, and we have sworn affidavits. So the sworn affidavits prove that the information was not turned over. That alone is a federal offense. And prosecutors can lie to us, but they can't lie to a federal judge in a trial.
Yeah.
So anyways, we're in a great position right now. So we're asking the new U.S. Attorney General, Pam Bondi, to investigate this and to take a real good look at it and to vacate these convictions and to there should be some action against what they did to us. So look, you know how damaging 5 years in prison is, away from your kids, away from your wife, and what we had to go through there. I mean, it was very difficult, very hard on us. Hard on the family. I had a 2-year-old son that was in diapers. They took him away from me. They took my 4-year-old daughter away from me. They took me away from them. I had an 8-year-old daughter. I had an 11-year-old son. I had a 13-year-old son. They took all of that away from me, and I didn't get to spend that time with watching my babies grow up, my family, and it was torturous. And I wonder how could a person even do that to somebody, knowing it was a lie, and we know that now because see with these documents we have, these sworn affidavits, they all say this is the prosecutor that was in there, this is the investigator that was in there, this is the FBI agent that was in there, and they all took notes. Well, where are those notes? They were told by a judge and instructed to turn them over, and they told the judge they didn't exist. And we have absolute sworn testimony, unrefutable testimony that they do exist. That's what we're dealing with now. And so, I started studying this, and, if you want to shut me off and ask me a question, go ahead. But I want to tell you something I found. I found something called the National Registry of Exonerations. There was an article that was written. It's called the Government Misconduct in Convicting the Innocent. This was written in September 1st on 2020, and they listed 3,593 full exonerations since 1989. They published this, and I checked it out. It's a very legitimate organization. The official misconduct contributed to the false convictions of 54% of the defendants who were later exonerated was concealing exculpatory evidence. It was the most common type of misconduct. It occurred in 44% of exonerations. Prosecutors committed the majority of that and the misconduct in those cases. And they were responsible for most of the concealing of exculpatory evidence and misconduct at trial and a substantial amount of witness tampering. We know that takes place. They do that. They did that with Nick Bailey. They tampered with him. They morphed his conversation. On my website, richardscrushypress.com, I have put whistleblower, which was the paralegal that worked with the prosecutors in the Department of Justice. She has blown the whistle on them. There's a statement from her, and in that statement, she talks about how every meeting she went into with Nick Bailey, which was the only witness, they morphed him from his testimony when he first came in was Richard didn't do anything to where they said, well, Richard, he had to have done something. I mean, he's a wealthy guy. He was running a big company. He did something wrong, didn't he? And so they took it from nothing all the way up to where they were saying, well, he might have done something. Well, maybe he did. Well, didn't he do this and didn't he do that? Until they got him to get on the stand and say things that were not true. Now, since I have been talking to Nick Bailey. Nick Bailey has been very nice to me. As a matter of fact, I called Nick Bailey yesterday and said, I'm going to go to the press conference tomorrow, and here's what I'm going to say. Nick Bailey has said, I hope it goes well. Nick has told me, I'm sorry. I know my testimony was not accurate. I now know the facts. I know that what I testified to was wrong. I know that you're innocent. There was no quid pro quo. There was no bribe. You didn't give the governor anything. There was no check passed. And I'm very sorry. I know you're a good, fine Christian family man, and I feel horrible about what happened to you, and I'm sorry that I played a role in it. Now, that's the only witness they have, Bryan. They don't have a witness. That's why I'm not even asking for a new trial. Who are they going to put up there? They have no witnesses. But this article goes ahead to say, it says that exonerations in federal white-collar crimes are the most common, accounting for 41% of exonerations. And it says the majority of what they were doing, the prosecutors were withholding exculpatory information.
There's a book, I forget what the lady's name is, but she was involved in the 2020 election being stolen. Her and Rudy Giuliani were like in the out front. Mm-hmm. And I feel like the name of the book is called Conviction Machine. Mm-hmm. And it's this whole idea that the federal, the Department of Justice and the U.S. Attorney's Office and the federal prosecutorial arm, they have like a 96 or 97% conviction rate.
Yeah.
Like, how is that even possible? Like,
Yeah.
one, they punk everybody out and make them plea. And I know guys, the two guys I was telling you about that took plea bargains, but outside of even those guys, there's a really well-known case. I'm not going to throw his name out, but well-known case, well-known guy here in the state of Alabama who took a plea bargain because it kept him from going to prison. And I talked to him, 5 years after or whatever, and I asked him to help me with this case that I was looking at with these two other guys, and he didn't want to help, but he did tell me he went into when he pled guilty to something he didn't do. He started crying on the phone with me, talking about pleading guilty to something he didn't do so that he could avoid prison. And
exactly.
so the amount of pressure that was applied to him to take this plea bargain, is and if he wouldn't have, he would have went to trial, and they have a 97% conviction rate. So it's something that needs to be discussed. It's something that needs to happen. It's like you said, it's in these white collar crimes. And again, had I not seen this with my own eyes at such a deep level, I would probably be less. Maybe I'd be a little bit more adversarial in the interview, but I've seen it in the stuff that you're reading. I know to be true, and our Department of Justice has a problem, right now.
And I think we have a president and an attorney general right now that's trying to clean it up because they did it to him. I mean, unbelievable. I can tell you that when they first came against me before the trial, they asked me to say things about Don Siegelman that were not true. And they even, and I had an attorney of mine who took me out and he said, "You need to listen to me." He said, if you'll go testify to what they want you to say, you'll get out of this mess. And I said, well, what they've asked me to say is a lie. I said, you want me to go sit on the stand, swear on a Bible that I'm going to tell the truth and just flat lie and tell a lie and put that man in prison? You want me to live with that? I went home. He said, yeah, you need to do it. I said, whoa, wait a minute. I went home and I told my wife, I said, you know what they want me to do? They want me to say these things about Don Siegelman. She said, well, that's not true. I said, I know it's not true, baby. I said, I know it's not true. She said, you're not going to do it, are you? And I said, there's no way I could do it. I said, I can't go sit on the stand, put my hand on the Bible, and lie about that man and watch him go to prison because of something that I lied about. I said, no, I'm not going to do it. So I told him no. My attorney said, you're crazy. Everybody does it. I said, I'm not going to do that. I'm sorry. And I spent 5 years in prison because I'm a stand-up guy.
Yeah. Everybody does it. Those words you just said.
Yeah.
And that is exactly what I witnessed in this situation. Is everyone's on the brink and they're like, do I want to be in here for 40 years or do I want to lie and throw this guy under the bus even though I know it's not true and I only get 2 years or whatever. And it's what the conviction machine, as the book was called, it really is. It's just turned into a thing where they just push people through like cattle and just burn.
They do it.
Stamping it. So again, I don't know all the details, and I just want to give you the opportunity to express your experience to an audience, and I think it's very interesting. And obviously, with everything that has been said and has been written about that, I'm interested to hear what you have to say. Is there any of the evidence that you can share with us? Are you guys timing? Are you going to wait for that, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, let me tell you a couple of things that I think are important. First of all, the thing that they accused me of was not even a crime.
Yeah,
they said that I gave money to a not-for-profit foundation to support a referendum that would have funded, elementary and high school education programs in the state of Alabama. That was a referendum that Don Siegelman was doing. It was a lottery thing.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't give him any money. I never gave him a dime. The prosecutors got out and said that he gave him this money. I never gave him that money. That was the most ridiculous thing. And then the fact, would you have given somebody a check if you were bribing them? I mean, this is about the stupidest thing I'd ever heard. I mean, that was a joke. We laughed about it, and but he gave them $500,000. I never gave him $500,000. That's totally a lie. I didn't give him any money. I never even supported Don Siegelman. I didn't give him a dime. I didn't support his campaign. I didn't know him even. And so they They made that claim, and they said it over and over. They'd come in the trial, and they would say it over and over in front of the jury. He gave them this. He gave them this. He did this. He did that. And the prosecutors were testifying. They were literally testifying. They didn't have any witness that would say that.
Yeah, as though they were there.
Yeah, and so then they got Nick Bailey up there and beat him almost to death. Got him finally to say, well, I think maybe he did, and maybe he had, and his testimony changed so much during the period of time, but they kept saying it and kept saying it and kept saying it. And the truth of the matter is the jury was somewhat corrupt as well. We have information on that. Tamara Grimes, who is was the paralegal for the prosecutors, her statement is on my website, richardscrushypress.com, and I tell everybody, go read that.
I'm going to put that in your show notes.
Yeah, when you read that, you're going to see that even the jury was corrupt. The prosecutors were corrupt. The jury was corrupt. And, there's questions about whether Judge Fuller, Mark Fuller was corrupt. He was removed from the bench and he was disbarred. And, there were a lot of things that went on in there that we do not believe he did right either.
Yeah.
So we had that situation going on. But anyways, what they accused of me.
RichardsCrushyPress.com?
Yeah, RichardsCrushyPress.com. But the things that they said I didn't do. And if I had have done those things, they are not even a criminal. Now, there were 113 former state attorney generals that filed an amicus brief with the Supreme Court and said that what they accused Don Siegelman and I of were not even criminal. And it wasn't. And what the case they made, try to make a bribe case. Look, let me ask you a question. Every single ambassador that every president appoints anywhere,
cuts a check.
They have to cut a check. That's the people that gave them several $100,000 or several million. Now you give them several million and you can become an ambassador. We all know how that works. Is that not quid pro quo? Why? Come on, give me a break. So I was to donate money. It didn't even go to the governor. What if I had have given some money to a charitable foundation to help elementary kids in school? How would that benefit the governor? It wouldn't benefit him at all. This is not a crime. They claim I bribed him to sit on a CON board, the health CON board. I had served under 3 previous governors on the CON board, under Hunt, under Folsom, and under Fob James. When I was on serving for Fob James, I resigned because I didn't want to be on it anymore. I was tired. I couldn't do it. I was running a Fortune 500 company. I didn't have time to go to those meetings, so I resigned. So here Siegelman gets elected. He puts Elmer Harris in, who was the president of Alabama Power, puts him in as his transition chief. Elmer and I, we were good friends. I always knew Elmer, knew him well, and liked him. Elmer was a 2-star general. He was an incredible guy, a really smart fella. He comes to my office and says, you need to serve on that CON board for Don Siegelman. I said, I don't want to. I'm done. I'm retired. I'm resigned. I'm not going to do it. You owe it to the state. You're running the largest healthcare company in the state of Alabama and one of the largest in the country. You need to be on that board. And I said, Elmer, I really don't want to do it. He said, I said, well, how long is the term? He says, it's a 3-year term. I said, Elmer, I'll tell you what, because you're my friend, I'll do 1 year. That's all I'm going to do, 1 year, and I'm resigning. I went on that board. I served 1 year. I went to only 48% of the meetings because I did not want to go to them. I resigned. I wasn't on the board. I was done. They claimed that I bribed him to be on the board. I had resigned from the Fob James, and I resigned from the board under Siegelman. I didn't want to be on. Why would I have paid him to sit on a board that I didn't want to be on and that I had resigned from? That was their case. That was their case. And so, and when you think about it, it was all a made-up scam. And so for almost 20 years, 18, 19 years now, this black cloud has been over me and my family, that their daddy was a felon. Their daddy was a horrible guy. Their daddy did this. He was a criminal. He did all these horrible things. He paid this governor a kickback. All of that is a lie. Today, the light has shined on it. We have the proof that everything was corrupt. They concealed all of that evidence from us, and that evidence would have changed that. And so now that's why we're asking, and I've even asking the new pardon czar, Alice Marie Johnson, take a look at this thing.
Yeah.
She said the other night on Trey Gowdy, she said, I'm looking for, said, what kind of pardons are you looking for? And she said, I'm looking for people that have been politically prosecuted, have done time, and now they're trying to get their life back together, and they can't because they're having to live with what was done to them. Well, that's me. I fit those shoes, and it's been very hard on me. I already had a high profile by running a Fortune 500 company and having to go through what I went through at HealthSouth. But, I won the HealthSouth. A lot of people don't even understand that. They had 36 counts that came against me. I was found not guilty on all 36 counts. I was fully acquitted on everything. And that was in 6 months, 6-month trial. I remember Jim Parkman, my attorney, at the closing statement saying, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we've been here 6 months. They have not produced one shred of evidence, not even a sticky note or an email that Richard Scrushy was involved in the fraud at HealthSouth at all. And for that, you have to find him not guilty. They came back with a not guilty on all 36 counts because I was not involved in that.
Was that a state case or a
federal case? No, it's federal case. Federal case.
Wow.
And they had started out, they had that all, they came with 85 counts or something like that. And I started looking at the counts. One of the counts was I bought a boat, and another count was I bought a car, and another count was, you buy, and they claim that, they make a claim on that. They got some legal claim because you spent the money you were being paid because you bought a car. Everything they could find to build up all these counts. Well, the judge immediately threw all that out. She threw it out. It was really interesting because it was 85 and she reduced it to 58, just flipped it. And then when she really started looking at it, she took it down to 36. But there's nothing more rewarding, I'm telling you, after you go through 6-month trial. I remember my dad was he was there. He sat there every day through the trial. One day, they had worn a wire on me, and they played the wire. My dad listened to all of that wire, and when they took a recess, my dad stood up behind me, and he said, "Hey, son," he said, "they ain't got nothing on you. We're walking out of here." And he was 80-something years old.
Yeah.
But it was true. They didn't have anything on me. And I went through all of that. And then the prosecutor, Alice Martin, what a corrupt individual she was. So let me tell you what she did. She went out and threatened to indict the whole company if they didn't put me out of the company. Now, I had built this company from scratch, and it was my money. I invested the first $50,000, built the company up to the largest healthcare company geographically in America with over 2,340-something locations. And I did that in a small period of time. We had over 50,000 employees. We were one of the largest employers in the state of Alabama. We were one of the biggest donators of supporting charities in this state. I personally gave $14 million of my personal money away over a 6-year period to charities in this state, helping all of them. I did I worked hard to help. I loved Birmingham. I loved Alabama. I grew up in Selma, Alabama. This was my home. I wanted to help everybody I could. I supported all the colleges. They named campuses after me. They did. I didn't ask them to do that. They did it because I was helping them, because I was supporting them, because they wanted to. And I went to UAB. I went to Jefferson State. I love this community. I did everything I could. And then they came and they, take the company away from me, do this, do that. And I was not guilty. They should have put me back over there. Everything that happened was wrong, Brian. And then immediately after I won that case on the HealthSouth case, was no time, they turned around and indicted me on this. And this was fraud. And so today, 19 years after this, 18 years after they sent me to prison, today the light shines on the corruption within the Department of Justice, and we're asking the U.S. Department of Justice in Washington, D.C., to turn this thing around and make this wrong or right. Now's time.
Political persecution, what do you think it was? So the Siegelman thing's a little bit more clear. They wanted to take Siegelman down, so they wanted you to say these bad things about Siegelman, and when you didn't play ball, they're going to crush you. What do you think the intention of the political persecution on the fraud cases was? Why do you think they came after you for that?
Because I'll tell you why. Because back in the day, you had Enron.
Mm-hmm.
You had what was the big phone company? Not Sprint, but
Bell South.
The company. The gentleman. There was a. Anyways, it was in vogue. They were, that was the time to white collar crime, and so what happened then was that all these prosecutors wanted to have their Enron. They wanted to have their Enron, and so there was some things that went wrong at HealthSouth. Okay, and the financial people that did it went to prison, and they were guilty. There's no doubt about it. They were guilty. They weren't as guilty as the prosecutors built it up to be. But they were guilty. They did some things wrong. I'll never forget the chief financial officer, Bill Owens. They asked him on the stand, when the FBI came in and raided the company to get information, had all the fraud been taken off the books? And he said, yes, it was off the books. There was no fraud on the books when they did that. He had created it, and he had cleaned it up. It was not there. The company's still standing today, and it's a multi-billion-dollar company. Where's Enron? Enron's out of business. We went after those companies. They're gone, those other companies, but not HealthSouth. HealthSouth is they changed the name to Encompass. They bought a company named Encompass, and they took that name on. But that was a company that I founded. We built it into a multi-billion-dollar company. It's a multi-billion-dollar company today. And it had $7 billion in assets. And what were those assets? They were surgery centers, buildings we owned. They were hospitals, medical centers. I owned a medical center in Coral Gables, Florida, big medical center, beautiful facility. We owned one in Dallas, Texas. We owned the big medical center here. We had hundreds of surgery centers. We had hundreds of imaging centers. We had 1,800 rehab centers. We had over 100 rehabilitation hospitals. These were properties and businesses that we owned, $7 billion worth. And they came in and said there was a problem with the company. You know, it really, truth of the matter is Alice Martin should have gone to jail for securities fraud because she went out and said all these horrible things about the company that were not true. She didn't say to people, oh, by the way, they may have some fraud on the books, but they got $7 billion in assets, so the stock price should have never gone below $7 billion. I mean, the valuation. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
She went out and drove the stock down to almost nothing. A lot of people started selling, lost money. They should have held on to it. She should have said, don't sell your stock. We got a little problem over here, but I'm sure they'll fix it. And they did. You know, the whole fraud thing, not a problem. The company's still standing strong, right? Making billions of dollars. There was nothing wrong. That's not what she did. The wrong thing. She hurt the shareholders. Had $7 billion in assets. She didn't tell them that. And I should have never left the company. And the only reason I told them when this happened, I said, I want to take a three-week administrative leave. I want to meet my attorneys, and I want to get this thing straightened out. Well, she then came in and threatened that if you bring him back, I'm going to indict the company. And the board then said, well, he probably shouldn't come back then. I should have come back. Okay, so let's take Jamie Dimon. Let's take what he did at his big company, J.P. Morgan. What happened there? $3 billion fraud, and it was there. What did they do with Jamie Dimon? They paid the fee. They paid the federal government back the money, the fines. Jamie Dimon's still the CEO of the company. We didn't have a $3 billion fraud. If there was a fine, we should have paid the fine. If there was something wrong in the belly of that company, it should have paid the fine, and I should still be running the company today. And if I was there, it'd be 5 times the size it is today, because I was the visionary. The guy that's running the company today, he worked for me. He was a lower-level guy. He got promoted up. He's not a visionary. I was the entrepreneur that built it. I built it into a multi-billion-dollar company from scratch. It was an idea. It was a dream. It was my dream. It was my vision. It wasn't his. He's just over there he's just a
second generation.
He's just a keeper, Yeah.
Yeah. I get it. Man, this is it's been a privilege. I appreciate you taking the time to come on and talk to me. I appreciate your passion. Obviously, it's been probably welling up for a while, and I'm glad we were able to give you an outlet and to come on and tell your side of the story. So thank you.
Well, what really helps is being with somebody like yourself that's been through what you've been through. You can appreciate and understand many of the things that I'm saying, and I really appreciate you letting me vent all this. I feel better now.
Good.
Yep.
We'll maybe come back as the releases keep coming. We'll continue to have you on, maybe even get Siegelman on. That could be interesting.
Yep. And he would do it. He's a great guy.
Yeah, and we'll just continue to keep you guys informed on how this is going. So this is a pretty big story. Everybody's talking about it today, even yesterday. AL.com was talking about it. Everybody else was talking about it. I was on Talk 99.5. It was going on. They were talking about it, and so this will be a big story, and it will be really interesting to see what the Trump administration does with this. If they pick it up, if the pardons are, she's from Alabama, is she not? She's in Alabama.
Well, she did her time at the ladies' prison here in Aliceville, is it?
Yeah. And where did you do your time?
In Beaumont.
Beaumont, okay. So, yeah, that'll be really interesting. There's an Alabama connection there on the pardon czar. So, we'll continue to stay in touch and keep us informed as things progress.
Yeah, we got to come back one day and just talk about prison life.
Yeah, we could. That would be a fun one. We'd do about 3 hours on that.
Sure can. We can talk about Hamburger Day and Chicken Day.
Mine, they had multi-purpose patties, is what we called it.
Is that right?
And so it was this hockey puck of meat. And they'd put gravy on it, and it was called steak.
Yeah.
And they took that same puck and they'd put it on some hard bread, and that was a hamburger.
I know it.
Right. And then so it was whatever, it was any variation of the hockey puck.
Yeah.
But they doctored it up with words that made it somehow different than the hockey puck.
You gotta tell the story that the chicken came and it said on the box,
yes, not for human consumption. That is a real thing.
See, I told you that.
Real thing. And it was only left legs, because that's the one that they jab with the steroids.
See, and here's one other thing you got to know. They bought all of Burger King's old hamburger meat, and it had expired, had been a year expired, and they came in there with a shipment of that, and they fed that to inmates.
Yeah.
They did it.
And we ate it.
For a fact, we ate it. We ate it, and we thought it was good because we were about to starve to death.
Yeah.
But let me tell you, you take a green apple out of the cafeteria, they'll put you in the hole.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, unbelievable.
Crazy stuff. Richard Scrushy, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, man. Hey, enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
All right, guys, that is going to wrap it up for this week. I think this is going to be a really great episode, and we'll continue to keep you guys informed as this story progresses. And as always, put your trust in God. Keep your powder dry.